Well, you know the old saying, if you're not evolving and growing and changing, then you're most certainly moving towards stagnation and death. And with that in mind, if you've been around for a while, you know that this podcast has gone through multiple renditions, starting with the Feed You podcast. It was created right around the time of COVID, actually a little bit before COVID started. And we talked about things like how to feed yourself and feed your business. We talked about woo. We talked about how to plan your year, what to do in the middle of a giant transition year where the world had shut down. And then the next version of this podcast was the Second Act Entrepreneurs podcast. And that podcast was really focused more on a group of people that I could see coming into my circle that were embarking on second careers. And so they really needed help with how to connect the dots between their knowledge and growing a new business. And so that podcast covered things like how to set up sales funnels, how to build your website so that people knew what you did. We talked a lot about messaging. And I'm telling you these different renditions because each has built upon the other. And as my business has grown, the podcast has evolved as well. So the latest version that you may know and love and listen to was the CX Fanatics podcast. And that's where I made the connection between the importance of customer experience at all stages of the customer journey and growing your business. And so we talked about things like how to create a client experience that made you stand out in the marketplace, how to grow your wine club business in a way that no one else was looking at it, how to create a subscription business, all of the different components of a business and how customer experience played into those areas. And now my business is evolving again, which means the podcast is evolving again. We're still going to focus on customer experience because now it's even more important than ever. With the inflection of AI into our world and into the business world, giving people memorable experiences has become not only important, but critical to keeping us in touch with each other and in touch with the relationships that have always been done and are always going to be done by. So if you've been listening, you are probably aware of all of these transitions. And if you haven't and you're new, welcome. I'm so glad you're here and I want to let you know where things are going. As I said, my business is evolving. And in the last year or so, I've started to work in some very specific areas. And those specific industries are specialty medical practices, including things like orthopedics, sports medicine, functional medicine, and also professional services organizations like consultants, legal, engineering, IT firms. And I'm starting to work with larger organizations. So for those of you that don't know, my background was in corporate. I worked for GE and Canon, some really big organizations. And then I went the complete opposite way and started working with small businesses and entrepreneurs. And now I'm in the middle, which is kind of a new and interesting place for me to be. But what I keep seeing across all of these different audiences is the same pattern. They're all spending some sort of marketing budget, sometimes 6, 7, or more figures a year on marketing. But most people can't tell you whether it's actually leading to patients or clients. Their calendars still aren't full. Their referral networks, if they have one, is either underperforming or not performing. And the experience they're delivering, whether it's fantastic or not, most people don't even talk about it because they don't know how to. At the end of the day, all of these things that they're focusing on aren't translating into growth because nobody knows how to talk about them. They don't know what they do, and they don't know why they're different. Customer experience as a whole is starting to feel like it's almost too broad for what I was doing. And I was focusing not just on how to help businesses be nicer to customers. I was actually diagnosing why their entire growth systems are broken. And we would create a strategy to fix all of the components within their business around acquisition, retention, and referrals. And we realized and pointed out to them that they're all an interconnected loop. And so the CX Fanatics was a great container for the earlier version of this work. But that conversation has outgrown that container, just like the other times that I've evolved the show. And so we have a new name. The new name of the show is the Profit Loop Show. Now, the name was chosen very intentionally because profit is something that every business leader, owner, founder is focused on. If you don't have profit at the end of the day, your business is not healthy. And there are 3 specific levers that are aligned with profit growth. They are acquisition, retention, and referrals. They aren't separate strategies. They aren't separate entities. And oftentimes they're treated very much so. But they're a cycle. When one feeds the next, growth becomes self-sustaining, and that's the loop. When you can continue to have that growth self-sustaining, that means you don't have to work so hard to market your business. Every episode of the show is going to map out one of those 3 levers. Sometimes we're going to be talking about revenue, and that is focused on how patients or clients find and choose you over everybody else. The next week, we may be talking about what happens after they walk through the door or why they're not walking through the door, and why that experience really determines whether they come back again and become a long-term client or patient. That's retention. And then the final area that we're going to focus on is how do we get them to talk about us to their friends and family so that they are referring us regularly in a way that is easy for them and makes us appear as the shining star that's going to solve the problems of their family members, of their friends, of people they meet randomly at the grocery store. That's referrals. That's your referral engine. That's where the magic really starts to happen. When you have a systematized, intentional referral mechanism, you don't have to work so hard to get patients or clients. Underneath all of it, the reason that this transition really is taking shape is a concept that I've started to call purposeful hospitality, somewhat borrowed from the restaurant industry and the book that was written by Will Guidara, Unreasonable Hospitality. But it's more business focused, and it focuses on the idea that the experience you design for your patients and clients isn't just a nice to have, it's a powerful growth strategy and differentiator. That means you don't have to spend more money on ads, spend more money on marketing. Instead, you can design better experiences with intention that drive the entire loop. Meaning you can actually charge more money for an experience that they might never receive down the street from a competitor that has twice the pocketbook that you do to spend on marketing. So you may be wondering, how do I even know if this podcast is for me anymore? Well, let me give you a couple of ways to determine that. If you happen to be in a medical specialty practice where you're a physician owner, a practice administrator, a managing partner, this show is actually built just for you. You're facing challenges right now with patient growth, competing against major PE-backed groups who are gobbling up everybody under the sun that they can, and they have way bigger budgets, and you are trying to do your best to make sure your online reputation and referral networks are actually producing new patients. That's exactly what we talk about on this show. The other group of people that will benefit from the show are people that are in professional services firms, whether that's consulting, law, engineering, managed IT, cybersecurity. You're dealing with the same fundamental growth challenges that the medical practice community is facing. They're just being acknowledged with different terminology. And client acquisition, retention, and building a referral ecosystem that doesn't depend entirely on your personal network are things that we're going to talk about on the regular. Honestly, if you're not in either of those camps, I'd love for you to stay tuned because I really feel as though if you care about growing a sustainable business or you're reaching to be a larger business, this show is going to give you the behind the scenes game plan to ensure that you get to your goals and where you're going. Customer experience isn't optional anymore. It's required. And as AI takes the world by storm and marketing by storm and all other components of different industries by storm, it's even more important for us to realize human connection and to go deep on how we're developing those relationships and those connections. This show is going to give you a specific game plan every single week to move you in that direction. And when you can start to out-human your competitors, that's when you're really going to see the growth take off in your organization. So here's what you can expect every week. Every week, I'm going to be releasing a new episode focused on one specific growth challenge faced either by specialty practices or professional services firms. And it's all going to be tactical, practical, and not just random conversation. It's going to be in terms that are understandable by any audience because let's face it, you're running a business. You don't have time to learn marketing terms. I'm also going to include some specialty specific services, doing deep dives into verticals like orthopedics, functional medicine, consulting, where I'm going to break down specific dynamics for growth for those industries. As an example, over on YouTube, I just recently went into 6 different medical practices online experience, and I did a deep dive on reasons that they're probably losing patients. I want to do something similar to that on the podcast so that we can dive into a specialty industry or practice and see what's really affecting them. The other thing I'm going to talk about on the show is the P3 method, which is a methodology that I created that evolved around a framework I started to use with organizations that align patient and client experience, profit, and purpose, and show you how I use that system to determine where a practice or firm's biggest growth opportunities are and how we can get you there quicker. If you want a head start on where we're going and you want to see where you are in that respect, I created a quick assessment that you can go sign up for free. You can go to elisaconnor.com/assessment, and I will come and look at your practice or your firm and give you 3 things you can focus on today while you're waiting for new episodes to be released. So that's the story. The CX Fanatics podcast is bidding farewell, and we are welcoming a new chapter to this podcast, the Profit Loop. And I hope that when you tune in every week and you get the action plan, that you really do take action. You take that plan and you put it into practice for your organization. Because together, we have the opportunity to evolve patient and customer experience, connect more deeply with other human beings, and ultimately change the world. So I'm grateful for you if you have been here along this entire journey, and I'm even more grateful if you choose to continue on the journey with me. I appreciate you, and I hope that every episode gives you an opportunity to look at your own business and see what ways you can improve the way that you connect, interact, and deliver unreasonable hospitality. So stay tuned. New episodes are coming, and I look forward to connecting with you every week. Take care, be well, and I'll see you soon.